Feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank.
Welcome back to another episode of the Shrimp Tank. We come to you virtually from Seattle and the entire Pacific Northwest. Listen, if you want to learn how to start, grow, or run a successful business, you are in the right place. This is where we say street smarts and book smarts collide. Hello again, everyone. I'm Dan Whedon, and I'm joined by my co-host, the incomparable Michelle Baumberger. Our guest today is Ben Hansen. Ben is a seasoned entrepreneur and business consultant with a track record of success and impact in the consulting and staffing industry. Ben consults with owners of staffing, consulting, and recruiting companies on growing profits, revenues, personal energy, and this is really important, joy. He is passionate about helping children in America graduate high school ready to win at life, and is committed to enrolling, training, and expanding his clients' personal and company involvement in children's charities and nonprofits in the United States. Really excited. I want to learn more about all of that. Welcome, Ben, to the show. We'll be right with you. Everyone, look, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts. We're on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and of course, YouTube. You might say we are ubiquitous. Now, before we bring on Ben, Michelle, Happy New Year. Happy holidays, Happy New Year. How are you?
I'm great. Just got back from a vacation and ready to hit the end of the year and the beginning of 2024.
Well, I was living vicariously through all of those pictures that I saw on Facebook of all the, you probably saw me liking and loving all of them. I'm a little bit jealous. I have to tell you, I'm a little bit jealous of you for more reasons than that, but looks like you had fun.
It was amazing. It was really amazing. Little hiccups with the Rhine being so high with the water levels, but the tour group got things together and kept us on track. It was really impressive, very festive, very Christmassy. Food,
Nice.
glühwein.
Nice. So, as we go into the new year, I was thinking about New Year's resolutions, which I have my own thoughts and processes around why we do it and how we can actually get them to, but that's beside the point. I think it's easier and more fun to make New Year's resolutions for other people. I don't know about you, but I just think it makes it easier. And I've got one for Barb. She's not here. She can't hear me. I don't know that she even listens to the show. So I'm gonna go out on a limb, and I've got one for Barb, and then I'm gonna ask and see if you have one for your husband. I love my wife dearly. We've been together almost 40 years, and all those 40 years, she doesn't always close the lids to things like mayonnaise jars, or pickle jars, or a variety of different things. They're just almost closed. And the other day I took out my creamer to make my coffee, and this is like 6:15 in the morning. And my first move with the creamer is to shake it. I don't know if everybody else does that, but I do. And I shook it all over me. And so my first question, I think Barb was home at this point. She hadn't gone out to see the grandkids. And I said, "Did you use the creamer?" She goes, "Maybe," which means she did. And so my New Year's resolution for Barb is that moving forward for the rest of at least the year, she closed the lid on everything. And so I think she can do it. I've set that resolution for her. Whether I tell her about it or not remains to be seen. Do you have one for your husband, Michelle?
I was going to ask if you're going to tell her about it, because I do think that really is sort of, stepping it up a notch. So let me
Is that going
know.
to take it to the next level of getting her? I'm going to see. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to see if she actually listens to the show. We'll find out, because I'll let you know next time.
All right. All right. So for Matt, this is kind of a tough one. So this is a little cliche.
Okay.
So he's not a shopper, and yet he has fantastic taste. So when he chooses to go out, I remember very early on in our dating relationship, I was interviewing for a job, I had this lovely sort of maroon suit, and he picked out the perfect scarf to go with it. And I was just like, so he does that regularly. So the resolution would be to go shopping with me more often, to pick out those specific things that just hit the mark.
Well, are you going to tell him?
I might.
Okay. Well, we'll see if he listens to the show. We're going to
That's
find
right.
out if our spouses actually listen to our show or not, Michelle.
Excellent.
Well, enough of this nonsense. Maybe not. Ben, welcome. First of all, welcome to the show. I'm going to invite you to play along with our little game. Your spouse, do you have a New Year's resolution for her? We'll find out if she's going to watch the show or listen to the show or not. Do you have one for her? And then after that, please share with us, if you're willing to continue on the show, please share with us. Tell us a little bit about what the Profit Doctor is and what you do.
Sure. Thanks, Dan, for having me on the show. Thanks, Michelle. I feel like this might be a little bit of a judgment call / IQ test to see if you pick something for your spouse that's going to get you in trouble, or you're like, actually, she's perfect. I can't think of a single thing. I will probably invite her to just make a point of locking our doors. Sometimes I notice that she's a little bit more trusting than I recommend when it comes to locking the doors, but it's certainly a fairly small thing, and I'm excited for the new year and excited to be on this show. So the Profit Doctor is basically what we do here at Profit Doctor is I help owners and CEOs of staffing, recruiting, and consulting companies improve their companies. But most specifically and first is focusing on profitability. I have a belief that the business press in particular has kind of gotten people to believe a big lie, and the big lie is that growth is more important than almost everything else. And I consider that to be the #1 profit myth. And so I think so many clients that I've worked with have been focusing on grow, 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 but then you come to find out they are making less money in the company now than when they had the job that made them think they were going to be so great at starting this company in the first place. So usually the first thing we do is that we help them with profitability. Part of that is mindset. I call winning CEO mindset. And then we take those two things and then move into growth. And if you have the first two down, then that growth becomes really profitable and can kind of put you on the fast track to financial freedom and wealth.
So that's really interesting that you kind of niched into staffing consulting. Is there something unique about the profitability issues with that industry that kind of put you in a position to choose that? Or is it just, that just happens to be what your passion is?
Yeah, super great question, Michelle. I actually think that about 90% of what we talk about is applicable to quite a variety of typically more B2B and more service-oriented businesses, although companies like construction and manufacturing flow into some of the very same kind of core principles. But we have taken those set of principles and applied them more deeply to staffing, recruiting, and consulting so that we can essentially add more value, because the things that we offer have been incredibly tailored to those industries. And you might ask, why that industry? And so great question. Back in 2006, actually 2007, I left Microsoft to, as I used to joke, sell what I used to buy to the people I used to work with. And when I was at Microsoft in Seattle, I hired a lot of contractors in project and program management in the marketing space. So I left Microsoft to start a company called Mactus Group, and we essentially sold marketing and marketing analytics, consulting and staffing services to companies like Microsoft and some of the other big ones in the Pacific Northwest that included a little bit of work for Nordstrom's and T-Mobile. And taking a page from that book about 5 years ago, I started providing essentially coaching to the CEOs of the kind of business that I used to be. And so I figured that I would be more able to speak to kind of the nuances of the industry that I had been in for 15 years and won, for example, 5 Inc. magazine fastest growing awards, stuff like that. Thought I might have a little something to add for those kind of clients.
Ben,
That's great. One of the things that, Dan, I got to follow up here. One of the things that I think was an introductory point for us was some of the research that you were doing on LinkedIn around staffing CEOs and some of the issues that there. Can you talk a little about that research and what kind of you're trying to put together and who the audience is?
Sure. First, shameless plug. If you want to track me down on LinkedIn, it shouldn't be too hard. I'm pretty sure I'm the only Profit Dr. Ben on LinkedIn. And I know it'll be in the show notes. But we are running essentially two different types of research projects. One is just CEO top challenges. It's a real short, like 1-2 minute survey. We'd love to have your participation. And then the second one is a more in-depth CEO study. And in that case, we go in quite a bit of detail around best practices, lessons learned, things that they are doing great, things that they are either struggling with, or lessons that they've learned often the hard way. And my intentionality around that is to assemble essentially a canon of the best possible practices for the staffing, recruiting, and consulting space. And not every kind of company, but typically we're talking sort of that 2 to 50 million space, 7-figure, 8-figure type businesses.
So Ben, I got to believe you might have a list, and maybe it's a large list of what I'll call profitability killers. And you work specifically with staffing and consulting companies, of course, and recruiting. These might apply to maybe a lot of businesses. What are some of the top profitability killers for businesses?
Yes, great question. When you were talking about a long list, I don't know, it's Christmassy time right now. And I'm thinking Santa with his list, checking it twice. So I would say that there's a variety of profitability killers. The biggest, and I think the people who listen, well, we'll just say our listeners are going to hear this and they're going to dismiss it. But I would just invite you to hit rewind a couple of times and really let this one sink in. So I was saying that I thought that the profit myth around growth being more important than profitability was a key myth. And I actually think that what we'll call profit myths or head trash are in fact the most important profitability killers. And what I mean by that is, it sounds dumb, but if you're not focusing on profitability and you're not essentially putting profitability first in line, surprise, surprise, your profitability is not going to be very good. Now, I will say that there are some caveats to this idea that profit is tremendously more important than growth. One is for those of you who are VC-backed SaaS company technology providers with an infinite supply of low-cost capital that doesn't cost you a lot in equity, and you really are valued as a multiple of top line. It is possible that this does not apply to you. And then if you're, let's say, under $1 million in revenue or under some specific threshold of scale that may be required in your business, sometimes it does make sense to just put the gas pedal down all the way to try to get to that, what we might call like a minimum viable scale, and then focus on profitability. I'm going to use a terrible example that is not true, but let's just pretend in the plumbing business, for it to make sense, you need an office space, you need a certain set of supplies, you need to have 3 trucks, a full-time biller, and a full-time appointment scheduler or something like that. And let's say that really that equals a minimum viable scale of something like $1.5 million to $2 million a year of annual revenue. And anything below that, you just can't afford a full-time scheduler and a full-time bookkeeper and your office space. And you're just not going to win in that business. Again, that is like complete fiction. But in that example, that might suggest that you do have to just push to hit a specific revenue threshold. But what I find is a lot of people are just pushing on growth, but they're not really paying attention to profitability. And they're using that growth emphasis and this big myth that growth and top line is more important than bottom line as kind of a cover-up to not focus on profitability. So much more I could go on. Feel free to ask 100 follow-up questions, or we could talk about some other stuff or some other kinds of maybe more concrete tools. But I want to give you guys a minute to chime in.
Yeah, no, I think that there was a conversation on one of the EO circles about, Inc. magazine and Future Sun Business Journal's different lists that are really just top line driven, right? Fastest growing. Well, fastest growing what? Well, top line. Okay, well, I just lost, 20% of the total, yet I'm still on this list. And so that balance has been in various conversations that I've been around. How do you have, what kinds of conversations do you have with these CEOs around that kind of battle, right? I mean, yes, we all know the bottom line is the number, yet they're being told that the top line is really what matters. So, I mean, do you ever kind of come to loggerheads with folks on that topic, or does it just make sense once you tell them?
I don't know if we really come to loggerheads with my clients. I mean, to some extent, if they don't like the grape Kool-Aid that we're serving here, they tend not to become clients.
Right.
I will say you kind of skip from one thing to the next, which is everybody knows that profitability is more important than revenue growth. And I just kind of peel back the onion there a little bit to say, I don't know that that's entirely true. And in that is, in fact, that kind of first myth that I share when I talk about profit myths. I'll just share maybe a couple of other myths and then maybe a couple of core principles to maybe attack profitability more head on. So one of the other myths for people who's maybe a little bit more established is that they kind of, they say they care about profitability if you ask them, but if you look at their calendar, you'd say you wouldn't believe them. There's nothing on their calendar that week, the week before, or the week before that said, bring senior team together to hack profitability. Or what are the top things that would drive their profitability? Most likely things would include selling more of the best stuff to the best clients and cutting expenses. It kind of boils down to about that. But a lot of CEOs do a whole lot of things. I sometimes call it the sausage making, or basically getting drawn into operations that is not selling more of the best stuff to the best clients, optimizing the business specifically around profitability, or cutting stuff. So those would be kind of in the myth category, if you will. And then that is kind of I think a good segue into what are some real specific things you could do. Well, as a CEO, you're probably the #1 best salesperson at your company. If you spent half a day or an hour a day or 1 day a week focusing on selling your best stuff to your best clients or best prospects, you could probably make a tremendous dent in profitability, both by your actions and then the actions that you might spur in others when you set that example. And then I'm also a big fan of what I call the 50-20 rule, kind of a play on the 80-20 rule, which is I see one of my favorite books right up there. The 80-20 rule basically says, or the way most people interpret it, is that you make 80% of your revenue or 80% of your profitability from the top 20% of your clients. I think that is how it is generally interpreted among business people in the business press. What I say is before you go out and try to get more of those great clients, which I highly do recommend, I might suggest shifting the focus from the top 20% to the worst 20%, because chances are you could give notice to your worst 20% of clients, staff, products, markets, subcontractors, marketing initiatives, and say this Friday is your last day. And you would probably save a tremendous amount of time, money, and headache, and lose almost no profitability and hardly any revenue and hardly any actual productivity. So the 50-20 rule states that you can cut half of the worst performing 20% in the next 30 days. So that, just a quick recap. We talked about some profit myths, kind of that head trash that gets in the way of things, and then some real specific things. One is to get rid of the things that are holding you back, less is more, addition by subtraction, or as we call it, the 50-20 rule, which is to cut half of the worst 20% of your business in the next 30 days. And then, of course, you could always sell some of your best stuff to your best prospects.
Well, we are now at a point where we got to pay some bills. I guess we're talking about profitability. We got to pay some bills. We're going to take a short break to hear from today's spotlight sponsor. When we come back with our guest, Ben Hansen, for our Hot or Not section of the show, we're going to talk some Texas Longhorns. We're going to see if Ben has any interest in that. Don't walk away. We'll be right back with more of the Shrimp Tank.
Hook 'em horns.
At Equinox, we believe in the power of law to give business leaders the freedom and confidence to go boldly into the unknown. Entrepreneurs don't trust that lawyers can be affordable, accessible, or offer a strategic advantage. Law feels like a complicated cost that only the megacorps can afford, so they often go at it alone. We imagine a world where entrepreneurs have the same strategic advantage of law as the megacorps. Equinox makes it possible for all business leaders to have a general counsel in their team to support both strategic and tactical legal needs, knowing where you've been and where you're going, and guiding you on how best to achieve your goals while protecting what you've built, with an all-inclusive, fixed-price legal solution tailored to your business. There's no more worry about how much legal will cost or if you'll even get a response. Instead, you have a relationship with your legal team, access to legal support whenever you need it, and the freedom and confidence to take your business boldly forward. Our relationship starts with a complimentary business health assessment. Complete the 5-minute survey at equinox.law, and you'll immediately get a 30-page report to help you and your team prioritize the legal infrastructure you need to move your business forward. Plus, a complimentary consultation with our corporate counsel to walk through the report together and understand what your business needs now and for its future. Now's the time to invest in your business and go boldly forward with legal on your team. Equinox Business Law Group, strategic legal counsel for all.
Welcome back to the Shrimp Tank, where we interview the best and brightest CEOs and business thought leaders in the greater Puget Sound area and beyond. I'm Michelle Bomberger here with Dan Wheaton, and our guest today is Ben Hansen of Profit Doctor. We're going to kick off our next segment, Hot or Not.
Well, Ben, Hot or Not is where Michelle and I are going to pepper you with questions about business, about life, about a whole bunch of different things, maybe even some college football. You're going to tell us whether it's hot or not, and then why or why not. At the end, you win absolutely nothing. We hope you have some fun. I mentioned
Well,
the
I'm going to
Texas
start with hot like the sun.
You don't know how the question turns out from a University of Washington Husky alum who's going to say hot or not. Huskies over the Longhorns in the Sugar Bowl. I'm glad you said hot then. I'm really glad, Ben, because that's how I have it listed out. So, is that hot, Huskies over the Longhorns?
Nice flipping it around. I will tell you, my order of love of college football is Florida Gators, where I grew up, Texas Longhorns, where I went to business school, and UW, where I went to a number of games and lived in Seattle for 20 years. I think the Horns are going to take them.
All right, we'll see. We'll see. I had to bring that up. I did some digging on you. I had to do some dig that up. You got 2 of 3 in the last 4.
I suspect that they are going to dominate on both lines, and that's going to make the difference.
You and I may be talking later on next year. We'll find out.
All right. But either way, I feel like I'm winning because one of the teams that I love is going to go into the national finals.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, it's good to have some options that are palatable.
Yeah, I'm so glad that it's not Georgia, Texas A&M, Florida State, Miami, or Alabama.
Yep. So you from Gainesville?
I grew up in Gainesville, yes.
My husband grew up in Gainesville as well, went to Gainesville High.
Oh, nice.
So, all right. So hot or not, charity in business or giving back in business?
Oh, charity. I thought you were talking about like cherry pie.
No.
One of my top New Year's resolutions of all time was to drink more champagne and eat more fruit pie. And that was really a great year. But hot or not, charity in business, it's like on fire. I'm trying to remember that quote from Zoolander where some guy is like so on fire. I think that's Owen Wilson, but I can't quote it right here. I think it's super valuable for a couple of reasons. it is super valuable over the long term, because if that charity means something to the CEO, there is an improved and greater chance that that CEO's gas tank and their like level of purpose, and I don't know if we're allowed to swear on the show, but I guess you
Go
can
ahead.
bleep.
We're a podcast. You're all good.
There you go. That CEO's give a shit level is going to be higher if things that they care about, and not just care about like a slice of cherry pie, which is great, but long term is sort of empty calories. But those kind of things that feed your purpose are a core part of the company. I'll also say that I think that holds true for many employees, and especially the employees that you want to retain over the long term, and the employees that are the high performers. You know, I think high performing A players are more about mission than, you know, what kind of snacks do you have in the break room and stuff like that. And so when they're giving to Boys and Girls Club or Big Brothers and Big Sisters, or one of my favorites in Seattle, Team Read, or Communities in Schools, it's easy to fall in love with the company, to stay in love with the company, and to feel that you're working as part of a greater mission.
Can I ask a follow-up question here real quick?
Sure. Go ahead, Michelle.
I'm curious, without diverging too much from hot or not, Dan talked a little bit about your charitable work with education and young people. Can you share a little bit more about kind of where that comes from in your passion, your interests, and how we could learn more about the organizations that you're involved with?
We'll cut this part out if it seems a little too Machiavellian. But I consider myself a deep down American patriot. And I'm like, what kind of things could we do to make our country a better place 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, 100 years down the road? And it just seems to me, when it comes to giving back and donation and community service and all those sorts of things, a dollar spent on a younger person goes further in terms of, you know, altering that person's life trajectory and ultimately making a greater positive influence on society. So I'm a big believer in contributing to kind of children's education and things along those lines that I think are going to have a dent, or, you know, make a bigger impact in the trajectory of that person's life and their ability to be like a positive contribution to society. Somewhat ironically, just a shout out, gosh, they used to be called senior services, and wow, I forgot their new name, but the old Senior Services of Seattle, my buddy's the director of Meals on Wheels there, and I've actually done a fair amount of stuff with them. And so, I mean, I think it's a great organization. They're certainly not directly helping kids, but my personal passion lies more towards helping younger people.
Ben, that's awesome. So I have one more hot or not, at least for me. Hot or not, scheduling bedtime.
Oh, somebody's been digging deep into the background of my canon of LinkedIn posts. You know, for those of you who are a big fan of a book called The One Thing by the founder of Keller Williams Realty, or books like Atomic Habits, you might be thinking to yourself, what is something real simple? What is something I can do every day? What is sort of a lever that I can pull that will have a big outcome in my life? And there's very, very few entrepreneurs that will tell you that they didn't wish that they had more energy. They didn't wish that they had more focus. They didn't wish they had more like get after it during the day. And it's not a big secret where some of that might come from. If you're staying up late, goofing off on your iPhone, what you're not doing is you're not sleeping. You're not banking that energy that is going to allow you to move forward. Hopefully this thing is going to allow me to dig it up there and see it. But if you can see that little guy, this is like if you're a streamer, a pod.
Oh, you turned off.
Mute.
You muted yourself somehow.
Okay.
There you're back. You're back.
Yeah. What I was trying to say is this little thing is basically like a control panel for live streaming. But imagine it was like knobs and levers on the dashboard of your car. wouldn't it be great if there was a button that at 2:30 in the afternoon, when your butt is dragging and you've got a really important thing you need to get done, you could hit that button like the defroster on your car or the seat heater on a cold January Seattle day, and that thing would get fixed. Well, actually there is. And that button is like, go to bed at 10:30 instead of 2 a.m. The trick is you have had to have done it the night before. So I call scheduled bedtime is part of what I refer to with my clients as winning the night. And winning the night is code for winning the next day.
Because just before Michelle goes, I couldn't agree with you more. I've never had problems, remember, because I get tired, I go to bed. But even on my Apple Watch, I get my bedtime reminder every night, about a half an hour before I'm ready to be in bed.
That's probably why you're the world's best podcast host here at Shrimp Tank.
I can definitely attest to the energy levels. Dan is always on fire, energy-wise. So this is a little bit of a stale question, but because you're in the people business, I'm curious as to what you're seeing out there. So hot or not, hybrid work environments.
And hybrid is like work from home or like work in the office kind of thing?
Yeah, mix.
Yep. I would say it's almost like, at this point, it might be like the weather. Whether it's hot or not, it just is what it is. You know, you can be upset that it might be foggy and rainy tomorrow in Seattle, but you can either not play the game or accept the fact that the weather is what the weather is. And what I mean by that is, probably most CEOs, or at least older school CEOs, wish that people were in the office. I think a lot of that comes from there's a belief that productivity is higher. I think the genie got out of the bag with COVID in the sense that people got used to working from home. And I'm not sure that that genie ever goes back in the bottle. You know, the trick is if you don't have the right kind of incentives in place, if you don't have the right people on your team, if you don't have a way to kind of figure out if people are doing a good job, it becomes very tricky and difficult. In the spirit of like news you can use, I guess I would probably say, if as a CEO, it appears to you that somebody is probably phoning it in, well, they probably are.
Well, you know what? I can't believe how fast time is going. It's time for us to take our second short break to hear from our corporate sponsors. And when we come back with our guest, Ben Hansen, for our famous Plead the Fifth section of the show, we're going to have him jump into the DeLorean. He'll find out when you do. Don't walk away. We'll be right back with more of the Shrimp Tank. And Plead the Fifth is brought to you by our corporate sponsors, Ideal Life 360, Cornerstone Financial, First Underwriters Insurance, BC Fitness Studio, and Port Ludlow Resort. Please visit our website at shrimptankpodcast.com/Seattle to learn more about these terrific companies. Now back to the show.
All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Shrimp Tank, where we interview the best and brightest CEOs and business thought leaders in the greater Puget Sound area and beyond. I'm Michelle Bomberger here with Dan Wheaton and our guest, Ben Hansen. We're going to kick off our next segment, Plead the Fifth.
Well, you don't get to use Michelle and your attorney on Plead the Fifth. She's the one asking the questions. So am I. We're going to pepper you with questions about business, life, probably not college football in this one. We know where you stand on that. But at the end, you win absolutely nothing. Oh, by the way, you can plead the fifth once, but after that, all bets are off. So you're, I'm sure, familiar with the DeLorean and Back to the Future. We're going to send you back to Gainesville at 18 years old. You have 5 minutes with your past self. You're not going to mess up the time continuum. All right. So we don't have to worry about you disappearing. What advice would you give an 18-year-old Ben in Gainesville?
Whew. I don't know that I'll plead the fifth here, but let me think about that for just 1 second. It seems like I would probably tell that 18-year-old Ben to, number one, to sort of relax and chill out as a bit of a type A-er. You could probably relax, take a few deep breaths. It's going to work out. That might be a decent one. and one that I kind of pull from my coaching work, which is around confidence. It's so easy, particularly for young people, but somewhat ironically, most CEOs that I talk to deep down inside have all manner of flavors of imposter syndrome and challenges around confidence, or are surprised that people follow them day to day at work, don't appreciate how great they are. And I think I would tell that 18-year-old Ben, some things that would really try to help him boost his confidence. While I think he felt that he was confident, we all need that boost. And it'd be pretty cool if 50-year-old Michelle could go back to 18-year-old Michelle and be like, 30 some years later, or whatever that is. I'm not saying you're 50, I'm over 50. You got game. You're great. You're going to crush it. It's not like you can coast and phone it in, but you're real special and you're going to do great. That's probably about, those are the first two I got.
I love that, actually. I've got a college age kid, and that really resonates. So Ben, can you share who has been most influential in your career journey?
Maybe as a bit of a bookworm, I have really gotten a lot out of a variety of authors. And when I think about the Profit Doctor methodology, I really feel like I have pulled together sort of the best of breed of a variety of thought leaders, and then distilled that down and kind of stitched it together. A couple that I really, really, really like and would maybe recommend to some of your listeners. One is a fellow named Michael Michalowicz. He wrote a book called Profit First. I'm also a big fan of a book that he wrote called The Pumpkin Plan. And I think the smaller you are as an entrepreneur, well, let's just say sub 7 figures, below $1 million, I think both of those books are really, really impressive. There's another book called The E-Myth, written by Michael Gerber, widely quoted as a great book, and I think it is. I would also say that, maybe I would probably take the Pumpkin Plan first for those smaller companies, maybe followed by Profit First. But I do like the E-Myth. Some other ones that I really like include, I think I'm on the right side there. There's a book up there called The 80-20 Rule. Somewhere right around there, there's also a book called Necessary Endings. And both of those are really interesting in that they suggest that, I take that back. The 80-20 rule doesn't exactly say this, but in my reinterpretation that I like to recommend for people to use first, which was the 50-20 rule, which we talked about earlier, the 80-20 rule and necessary endings can speak to the idea that sometimes the best way to take some of the biggest steps forward is to essentially cut the ballast or the things that are holding you back or the things that you're spending your time on, kind of like pruning the things that are not the best so that you can double down and refocus more of your energies on the best. And that is also a theme that rolls through the book, The Pumpkin Plan.
I'm going to deviate from plead the fifth because I actually had a question way back in the beginning when you were talking about profit versus growth. And I want to ask the question before we go. You made a comment, which I believe you're 100% right, that most CEOs and founders of companies are their number one salesperson, right? Mm-hmm. And I've seen that. And having been in sales leading into my own entrepreneurial journey, I think that there is kind of just an intrinsic, I don't know if that's the right word, mindset of sell, right? And there's that, whatever the sell is, because when you were in sales, you didn't really have to look at the back end, right? You made the sale and you were compensated at some point for it. And looking at all of the other profitability factors, do you think that's part of the reason that you see more emphasis on top line growth versus profitability? It's just maybe the way that a lot of these folks came into the business.
I don't think so. I actually don't see it that way. It does bring out 2 or 3 sort of other threads that you were mentioning that I would kind of chime in on. First of all, when you compensate your salespeople, you want to make sure that they're doing the right thing. And if you're compensating them 100% on top line, but they also have flexibility on price and they can sell low margin products, well, it's generally easier to sell low margin commodity products at a discount. And so people will, generally gravitate towards what's easiest and compensates them the most. So where I'm going with that is, I think as the management team, it kind of behooves you to both set incentives and compensation structure and so forth to reward salespeople for selling the best stuff to the best people at full price. And then also to have whatever guardrails are in place to protect yourself from discounting or selling stuff on sale or selling the lower margin, crappier things that you're not as good at, or the more commodity oriented products. I think it's just sort of like if you pick up a copy of Business Week or Fast Company or something like that, they're all talking about, unicorns that had giant exits and or big top line growth. If you go to a cocktail party in America and you ask somebody about their company, people are happy to talk about top line. People don't talk about bottom line. It's sort of rude to talk about how much money did you make or what was the profitability of your company. And so I think that just all kind of gangs up on entrepreneurs and sort of tricks them into thinking it's all about growth. It would be rare that you'd go to a cocktail party and one guy would say, yeah, we doubled our revenue. And the group around that person wouldn't be like, ooh, ah. And the other person says, yeah, but you're probably running a 6 margin. We're only $750,000 of top line, but it's 80% net profitability. And then the whole room would be like, oh my God, you're so rude. Instead of, actually, you're the star. Let's listen to you.
Wow, I think we could go on and learn so much from the way you're thinking about profit. I know that I'm definitely taking notes as we go along here. For our listeners that are interested in learning more about you, getting to know your business, how can they contact you?
Sure. Well, cleverly, we picked Profit Doctor and Profit Doctor Ben as tags that are not used in very many other places. But if you type in profitdoctor.com, you can go to the website. Certainly, there's all manner of testimonials and content, and you can book a call, so to speak, and there's a form there. I will say that we do drop a fair amount of content on LinkedIn, and you can follow me. I think it's all the LinkedIn.com whack Ben Hansen. And if you just type in Profit Dr. Ben, no spaces, on LinkedIn, you'll certainly get to me. I would invite you to follow me, and if you want to, book a call to talk about if we could help you with your company. Generally we're looking at companies in the 7-figure and up. So typically like 2 million to 50 million for staffing, recruiting, and consulting companies. Although staffing companies have recruiting companies at $1 million or placement firms are going to have the same size organization probably as like a $3 to $5 million staffing company, just because of how they run their revenue. Website, LinkedIn. I also have a YouTube channel, Profit Dr. Ben. Shouldn't be too hard to find.
Yeah, and I can attest to the incredible content that Ben is putting out there, but also pulling together with the research that you're doing. So I'm really excited to see kind of how all that comes together. So thanks again for being a guest today. For all of our listeners, make sure you check out the replays at shrimptankpodcast.com/Seattle and wherever you get your podcasts, from iHeart, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and follow our social media pages on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram.
Well, Ben, thank you very much for being on today. I had a great time. Really enjoyed learning from you and hearing about your practice and all the great work you're doing. I love the children's profit, the nonprofit things. The only thing we don't agree on is Washington and Texas on New Year's Day. But you know what? It's all in good fun, right? Yeah, you're
trying to
hook
get
'em horns. I won't put the W up because I'll mess it up and somebody will get angry with that. But anyway, hey, thanks for being on. Happy New Year. Michelle, as always, great to see you. I guess I won't see you till 2024, but I wish you and your entire family and everybody at Equinox a very happy New Year. Everybody, year's up. We've had another great one on the Shrimp Tank. We will start again fresh on Wednesday, January 3rd, live streaming on our Facebook page. Our guest will be Marnie Langer from Langer Equestrian Group. Craig Swanson will be my co-host. In the meantime, be safe, be well, be prosperous, and have a great and happy new year. Because until next week, the shrimp is back in the tank. So long.
I've been feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond.